America, an experiment that has endured for nearly 250 years. And in that time, we spread across a continent. We grew to be the world's wealthiest and most powerful nation. We became synonymous with freedom and opportunity. So, what's the secret? How did 13 colonies sandwiched between the eastern seaboard and an untamed wilderness grow into a global superpower? Actually, there's a pretty good case that what makes us different is the vibes. No, seriously. It's the vibes. What does it mean to be an American? First of all, an endless choice of fried chicken sandwiches. God bless the USA. But what does it mean to be a real American? Maybe you think of the Founding Fathers. Maybe you think of the workers who built the towering steelworks of the Industrial Age. Maybe you think of the modern-day patriot whose eyes well up when they hear God bless America. Those are all plausible answers, but with an interesting wrinkle. One of the most famous of those Founding Fathers, born in the Caribbean. The man responsible for those towering steelworks, he came here from Scotland. God Bless America, written by a Jewish refugee from Russia who came through Ellis Island. All of which might sound kind of unremarkable to the average American. After all, we welcome more immigrants than any country on earth. This has always been an important part of our story. But here's the thing. This pattern isn't normal. In fact, it's what sober academic historians refer to as weird as hell. Here's what we mean. Throughout most of history, the identity of most nations was wrapped up with concepts of a common race, religion, or ethnicity. And that's still the case in much of the world today. Japan, for example, is a wealthy country that could be a magnet for people from around the globe. But its restrictive immigration policies leave it with a population that is, to this day, nearly 98% ethnic Japanese. Up until just a few decades ago, policies in Germany were so restrictive that even immigrant families who had been in the country for multiple generations were still treated as foreigners. In the United Arab Emirates, 90% of the population doesn't have citizenship rights, because most of the residents are foreign guest workers from South Asia, but citizenship is limited almost exclusively to native Emiratis. In all those countries, the message is, sure, you can come here, but you won't be one of us. And in the United States, we don't have that. And in fact, we never have. Even in the colonial era, America was already throwing its doors wide open. Religion? Well, you might think of colonial America as a hotbed of Puritanism. Maryland was set up as a Catholic colony at a time when many people thought that a free society couldn't tolerate Catholics' loyalty to Rome. The Quakers went to Pennsylvania. Visit Rhode Island and you'll find a synagogue that's been standing since 1763. Ethnicity? Sure, there were plenty of Englishmen, but there were also the Scots-Irish in Appalachia, Germans in Pennsylvania, and the Dutch in New York. And in the centuries that followed, the pattern continued. Waves of Irish in the mid-19th century, Chinese on the West Coast, Mexicans in the Southwest, immigrants from Italy, Austria-Hungary, Poland, and Russia by the turn of the century, a surge from Latin America and Asia beginning in the mid-20th century. These patterns so dramatically shaped the culture that today 40% of Americans can trace their ancestry to someone who came through Ellis Island, even though Ellis Island was only open for about 60 years. All of which invites an obvious question. How has any of this worked? After all, there's a reason so many other countries don't do this. Because a country made up of vastly different people from vastly different backgrounds can easily break apart from the resulting tensions. So why hasn't that happened here? The answer to that question goes all the way back to the nation's founding. When the Declaration of Independence was written, it pronounced that all men are created equal. It wasn't making a statement about the rights of a couple million people on the East Coast. It was making a statement about the rights of all people in all places. And as a result, what makes someone a real American isn't where they're from. It's what they believe. In 1858, Abraham Lincoln noted that perhaps half of the country's population, Germans, Irish, French, and Scandinavians, had no relation by blood to the founding generation. But because the founders' principles applied to everyone, he said, they have a right to claim it as though they were blood of the blood and flesh of the flesh of the men who wrote that declaration. And so they are. Which, let's be honest, is a pretty radical idea. Toleration for the Swedes? They come here with their flat-pack furniture and their umlauts and just expect us to be fine with it? You come to our country, you use our vowels. And while we're being honest, let's also note that for much of America's history, we failed to fully live up to this ideal. Nearly 90 years passed between the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the end of slavery, and another century or so after that before African Americans were fully admitted into the American dream. But when it finally happened, it was based on an appeal to those very same principles. In his legendary speech in Washington, Martin Luther King referred to the words of the Declaration as
a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir.
And other groups were similarly marginalized at various points in our history. We barred Chinese immigration in the late 19th century. Immigrants from countries like Ireland and Italy often faced deep hostility from Americans with deeper roots in the country. That Catholic colony in Maryland, eventually overthrown by Puritans, who outlawed Catholicism. But over the long run, all those groups would be fully woven into the fabric of America by invoking their equal claim to our founding principles. And in the case of the Catholics, they played the long game so effectively that now the Pope is from Chicago. So, what does it mean to be a real American? Well, you only have to take one look at our most iconic cultural contributions to realize it's not about where you're from. Hot dogs? We took some German ideas and did a remix. Pizza? Italy, you get the same deal. Baseball? We took an English game, changed some rules, and told the players they no longer had to dress like Wes Anderson characters. Rock and roll? Take the African traditions that forged the blues and gospel, pair it with the British and Celtic ones that gave us country music, put it in a blender, and hit frappe. Blue Jeans, brought to you by a German, reality TV, the royal family of the genre is Armenian, and don't even get us started on our spelling bee team. So, what is American culture? Well, it's kind of the world's greatest hits album. And who's a real American? Anyone who wants to be. Anyone who's willing to live by those founding principles. That freedom is our birthright. That we're all equal before the law, and that we're all entitled to the pursuit of happiness. But here's the catch. This can only continue to work if we want it to work. Because if a country is based on an idea, it can only endure if enough of us continue to believe in that idea. If enough of us continue to believe that we're bound together by common principles and shared convictions. As long as we can do that, well, there's probably another 250 years left in the tank, many of which may be shaped by people who aren't yet on our shores. Because that's the unique thing about Americans. They can be born anywhere. They just have to find their way here. And when they do, we hand out chicken sandwiches on entry. It's pretty awesome.